Hey everybody, this is Eric Kurtz, and in this video I'm going to be explaining how to solve a two-step equation. In the example we'll be looking at today, we're going to use the equation 3x plus 2 equals 11. And we're going to talk about how you can solve that. Now there's lots of different ways to solve an equation, but I'll be going through a specific process for this example today. So the first question is, what's it really mean to solve an equation? Well, in the equation you've got a variable, in this case the letter x, and that variable is standing for some number. And what we're trying to figure out is, what does x equal? It's some number, but what is it? Whatever number it is needs to make this equation true, that if we were to stick that value in for x and take 3 times that unknown number and then add 2 to it, we would get 11 as an answer. And so that's really what solving an equation means. It means figuring out what that variable is standing for. So in the end result, what we want to get to is basically this. We want to get to x equals something. We want to find out what x equals. Well, if you look at the original equation and what we're trying to get to in the end, you'll quickly see the problem is x isn't by itself. Instead, there's a 3 that's been attached to the x by multiplication, 3 times x. And there's a 2 that's been attached to it through addition. We've got plus 2. And so because these are there, x is not alone, and we don't know what x is. Solving an equation is pretty much figuring out how to get rid of these other things that have been attached to the x so that the x is alone and we can see what its value is. So that's going to be our approach today, is figuring out how to do that. Well, before we dive right into that, we do need to talk about order of operations, because the order in which we take these things off of x is important. So as a quick review, order of operations, this is something that tells you the order in which you need to do things in a mathematical expression. You might be familiar with the expression, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. These letters kind of help us remember things such as, first of all, we have to do whatever is inside of parentheses. If there are parentheses in a mathematical expression, we always have to do what's inside of there first. And then after that, exponents. If there's anything to the second power or third power, we have to do exponents next. After we've done that, next we have to do any multiplying or dividing in the expression from left to right, whichever order they come in. And then finally, any addition and subtraction that are in the expression, we would do those last. So it is important to know the order of operations, because that's going to help us when we go to solve the equation, as you'll see here in just a second. So let's talk about what's going to be our approach for solving this equation. Well, we're going to use sort of a analogy of unwrapping a present for solving an equation. Let me explain what I mean by that. In my analogy, we're going to say that the x, the thing we're trying to find, is the present. In this case, we've got a video game console here, a handheld video game device, and the x is going to be the present that we're trying to get to. Well, you don't just give somebody a present. Instead, you wrap it up. So that's where the 3 that's getting multiplied by x and the 2 that's getting added come in. Those are like the box and the bow on the box that are wrapping up the present. They're getting attached to it. The present is going inside of there and they're getting wrapped around it. And so as I mentioned before, our goal is to figure out how to unwrap the present, how to get rid of the 2, get rid of the 3, so that the x is by itself and we've got our toy, we've got our present from inside of the box. And so that's sort of the approach we're going to take. All right, well, let's actually map that out then and see how that's going to work. So in this analogy with 3x plus 2 equals 11, the toy, like we said, is the variable x. So the next question is, well, what's the box? Is it the 3 or is it the 2? Well, this is where order of operations comes in. This is what we were talking about earlier. When the present got wrapped up, what's the first thing that happened to it? Well, according to order of operations, you always have to do multiplication and division before you do addition and subtraction. So 3 times the x would come before the 2 getting added onto it. So being multiplied by 3 is the first thing that happened to the x as it got wrapped up in the present. So that's kind of like putting the x inside of the box. That's the times 3. The next step then would be putting the bow on top of it. Well, that's going to be the plus 2 because order of operations, addition and subtraction come after multiplication and division. So that's how the present got wrapped up. We've got an x, but it's been multiplied by a 3, and it's had a 2 added to it. That sort of wrapped the present up. If we want to get the toy out of the equation, if we want to solve for x and find out what it is, we have to go the other direction. We have to reverse the process. So that means first we need to take off the bow. Well, if the bow is the plus 2, how would you take that off? Well, you would do the opposite of that, or the inverse in mathematical terms. You would subtract a 2, so that would take the bow off. Great. Well, then how would you open up the box? Well, the box is times 3, so we would need to divide by 3, because again, that's the opposite, or the inverse of multiplying by 3 would be dividing by 3. And if we can do that in that order, then we should be left with the x all by itself. So that's our plan. It's kind of like the x is the toy. It got wrapped up in a present, and we're now going to subtract a 2 and divide by a 3 to undo what has been done to the toy. Well, let's actually do it now. So once again, there's our familiar equation, 3x plus 2 equals 11. We said the first thing we were going to do was subtract a 2 to get rid of the plus 2. Now, when we do it, we actually do it to both sides of the equation, because an equation is a mathematical expression saying that one side equals the other. So anything that we do to one side of the equation, we want to make sure we do to the other side as well to keep it balanced, to keep it equal, because that's what the equal sign is all about. So if I subtract 2 from the left-hand side, well, I need to subtract 2 from the right-hand side, so I'm doing the same thing on both sides. Well, the great thing about subtracting a 2 is it is the inverse of adding a 2. And so that's going to remove the bow, so to speak, from our present. That's going to get rid of the plus 2, and all that's going to be left on this side is the 3x. Now on the right, we had an 11, we subtracted 2, so there's a 9 left on the right-hand side. All right, so we've got the ribbon taken off. Now we need to open the box. And we said the box was the 3 being multiplied by the x. So to undo that, we're going to divide both sides by a 3. We'll divide the left by a 3 and the right by a 3. Well, 3 divided by 3 cancels out or becomes 1, and 1x is just x. And then on the other side, 9 divided by 3 is going to become 3. And hey, we've done it. We've gotten the x by itself. We removed the plus 2. We removed the 3 times x. So now x is alone, and it equals 3. We've got our answer. We have solved the equation and figured out what the value of x should be. Now, if we want to make sure that that's right, we can always check ourselves. And by checking, what that basically means is you say, I believe x equals 3, and my equation was 3 times x plus 2 should be 11. Well, we can take that value and plug it in for x. So instead of x, we put the 3 in there that we think the answer is, and we can work it out and make sure that was correct. Now remember, order of operations, multiplication comes before addition. So 3 times 3 would give us 9. And then the 9 plus the 2 would give us 11, and 11 does equal 11. So yes, that is the correct answer for x. So this is just one way to think about solving a two-step equation or any multi-step equation, is figuring out how the present got wrapped and then reversing that process and removing each of those numbers one at a time using the inverse operations. Hopefully this helps you feel a little bit more comfortable with the idea of solving a two-step equation. Thanks for watching the video.